Hi, I'm Mauricio Dushulo, and I'm going to be discussing Lev Vygotsky, a Russian child developmental psychologist. Vygotsky was not very well known in the West until the 20th century, probably between 1960 and 1980. He was very well known in the Soviet Union, and his work was the source of a certain degree of debate and criticism. Vygotsky really came to his own after the Bolshevik Revolution, where he gained a government post and an internship at the Moscow Institute of Psychology. However, his career only lasted 10 years. It was cut short by tuberculosis at the age of 36. Vygotsky had several theories which are becoming more and more prevalent today and are getting more and more attention due to their validity. The first of which is a theory of zonal proximal development, or ZPD. ZPD ties together with what we know as scaffolding. ZPD basically says the following. It says that a student will have a minimal range at which they can accomplish work as if they were working by themselves, and they will have maximum range accompanied by a learned individual, a teacher, a mentor, or a tutor. An example of ZPD at work may be the following. Let's take an example of a low section in a situation, the lowest possibility, that is a student walking in by himself without any help. He walks in to a chemistry class and he sees these two very nice bottles with chemicals in them. So he mixes them, and next thing we know, our student is gone in a puff of smoke and an explosion. That's what happened when he worked alone with no one to help him. Now, Vygotsky says that if we bring an individual into the picture and guide him, that he should do much better. And in fact, this will probably happen. If a chemist or a teacher were to walk in, they may say to him, "Johnny, do not mix the nitric acid with the titanium powder, or there will be an explosion and you'll be hurt." And here is where scaffolding comes in. We know scaffolding to be a very functional tool. How do we use it? We bring a student to a certain degree of knowledge. When we are certain that he has grasped the material we're teaching him, we go ahead and we take him up to the next level to make sure that he's got that material. Once he's got that learned, we bring him up to the next, and so on until he's mastered the subject completely. Well, in this case, we can see the scaffolding in the instance of the teacher telling the student, again, for example, more information. Johnny, nitric acid is an oxidizer. This is a material that likes to give away oxygen, and titanium is a reducing agent which likes to take oxygen. And when these two get together, the exchange creates a tremendous amount of heat and energy, which is uncontrollable, and explosion results. We can go on from there. We understand scaffolding. We've used it before. I think enough is said. But why is zonal proximal development important? Why is it something that would be considered an idea that is revolutionary or different? It is because of constructivism and behaviorism. What do these two theories say? Specifically constructivism. They say the following. They say a student will not be ready to do a particular task until he's reached a certain age. Say, for example, a student will not be able to do physics until they've reached 10th grade. Vygotsky says that is absolutely not true. Vygotsky says we can take a student, and assuming we have no organic limitations, obviously things like this are excluded, and we, given the appropriate teacher, given the appropriate approach, we can teach that student to do work a little at a time, using what we call scaffolding, interacting with those who can teach, and eventually we can successfully teach a student to do a task. Obviously, there'll be limitations. We're not expecting them to be able to do complex, for example, differential equations on the first day, but again, through scaffolding, eventually, and again, assuming no organic limitation is present, we can keep bringing students higher and higher in their abilities. Now, along with zonal proximal development, Vygotsky had a couple ideas on internalization and social interaction. Now, what exactly did he say? Well, his ideas were on cultural mediation, is exactly what the term was called, and it sounds a little bit like this. In essence, Vygotsky says the following. Vygotsky says, an individual is influenced not only in the way that they behave, but also in the way that they learn by the society around them and the people around them. Let's take an example. Let's say, for example, that I am Italian. And we could say that because I've been around Italians all my life, that I drive fast. Well, I drive fast. There's nothing to be said about it. It's true. Is it because I'm Italian? I don't know. But is it because I've been driving around people who do drive fast quite often? That's much more possibly true. Vygotsky also says that along with the social modification aspect of it, we have our own modification, and that's where the internalization happens. And the internalization is where we make the task our own. For example, practically everyone that we know knows how to use a knife and a fork. I'm sure you can think of a few people who don't, but we'll leave them out of the equation for now. Vygotsky says that the way that those around us use it, our society, our family, our culture, will influence the way that we do it, and then we will put our own signature on that particular task. That is the internalization aspect of social mediation. And I personally agree with him, because in fact, if we look at the two and combine them, we can see why some people may create stereotypes. The stereotype I mentioned before. I'm Italian, therefore I must drive fast. For example, one may think someone who is from a northern country must be a good skier. Well, between the social mediation and the internalization, perhaps the way that I would, for example, ski, and the way that someone else taught the same way I would will be different, would be based on our own interpretation of the task that has been taught us. What else did Vygotsky say? He said a lot of things, but unfortunately I don't believe we have time for all of them. The next thing that I'd like to discuss was his theories on the role of play. Now, on the role of play, Vygotsky basically said, here we do have a case in which the child must reach a certain age. But again, this is organic. Before a certain age, a child does not have the imagination necessary for play. But once that imagination is gained, play has a very valuable role. Let's take, for example, a child who would like to have a bright toy or some other object but can't have it. At a certain age, before the child can imagine, the child may become angry, cry, fuss. I think we've all seen it. We don't need to go any further. But at a time in which a child can begin to imagine, something happens, Vygotsky says. Vygotsky says that at the point that the child can imagine, at this point he makes a reality switch in which he can imagine that something else is that object. For example, let's say a little boy would like a car. We all know little boys can't drive, but he may go in his garage, he may get a brown box and sit on it and say, hey mommy, this is my car. Here, between imagination and the role of play, he is living his reality, whereas he doesn't really have a car. As he gets older, the role of play and the imagination component will become less and less important. Obviously, as we get older, we realize that we much prefer to live in the real world than a fantasy world. And we eventually grow into the point that we choose reality and understand the concepts of reality and also the consequences of not having cost effect, opportunity cost, and many other things. So Vygotsky had many ideas which are becoming more and more recognized. And I, for one, am a very firm believer on ZPD. I have been told many times, this particular student cannot learn in your physics class. My answer has been, give me the chance. I will try. And I truly believe that there are very, very few limits. I believe that we can teach children physics long before 5th grade. And case in point, I believe right now, if I'm not mistaken, that there are students in South Korea taking physics in 5th grade. I believe that those teachers and those planners probably listened to Vygotsky. I know I would have. Anyway, at this point, I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation. I hope you've come away with something from it, and I hope you'll take a look at the questions, and hope you have a good night. Thank you for listening.